Hey everybody, I wanted to start a new conversation with you about Battletech. But before we jump into that, I first and foremost I wanted to check in with everybody and hope everyone's doing okay and staying safe and healthy and sane and all that good stuff. This COVID virus stuff is pretty serious stuff, so I hope you're all doing well. And please do take care of you and yours. It's a trying time. People are doing the shelter at home or, trying to limit our exposure and kind of hopefully um, give our infrastructure a chance to get through some of these challenging cases. But anyways, this is not about that. But I did want to kind of check in with folks. Hope you're all doing well, and I hope this conversation takes helps take your mind off maybe of some of the world events, at least maybe even for a little bit. Um, but as I kind of got to thinking, as I'm kind of getting through my painting backlog and my hobby backlog, and I'm even thinking about doing some games on Mech and maybe posting those up as battle reports during the shelter at home time. But I've been thinking about that upcoming Kickstarter, and I know things are probably likely going to be delayed. I have no insider information on this, but at this point, you know, there's no news aware of other than the original delay, but I don't anticipate that that's necessarily going to, stay status quo. But regardless, eventually we will be getting that clan invasion Kickstarter mechs, and that will be a joyous day for all of us BattleTech fans. But um, what I want to cover is for the newer player who may only have the basic box set or the Game of Armored Combat box. The conversation I wanted to have with you is what to expect when the clan mechs hit our doorsteps from that juicy, juicy Kickstarter delivery. That wave one, are you going to be getting some clan mechs in your mail? And what to kind of think about when you're getting those clan mechs. Like if you've been, like again, if you're newer to the BattleTech scene, you may not be fully aware of the differences between the clans and the inner sphere. And so, really, what I want to do is maybe even a little bit of lore here, kind of take you back in terms of what does it mean in terms of the background and the timeline and the story, and what does that all mean in terms of like you're getting these brand new mechs. How are they going to be different, and what's the differences between the mechs that you're seeing in the game of Armored Combat and the new clan invasion Kickstarter mechs that you're going to be getting hopefully pretty soon. So this video blog is aimed at that newer player. Maybe you've had a game or two of BattleTech from the recent box sets. You've played with the Catapult and the Commando and the Battlemaster and all those great mechs. Those are all Inner Sphere mechs. So the Inner Sphere is that cradle of worlds where the organization of Star League was formed. Now, Star League was this interstellar council that was governed several areas of the known galaxy, specifically the Terran hegemony, or the great houses of the inner sphere, and the periphery worlds. Not or. There's three parts to the inner sphere: the Terran hegemony, the great houses of the inner sphere, and the periphery worlds. So let's maybe settle into a little bit of lore here, and I'll kind of walk you through how these clans came to be, because it's pertinent to how those little lumps of plastic that you're going to be playing with, and hopefully in a few months, but we'll see. But how are those little lumps of plastic in terms of the clan mechs? How are they going to be different from the ones that you know and love from the Inner Sphere? So the Terran hegemony was quite literally the center of the known stellar universe for humankind, starting with Earth. In universe, it's called Terra a lot, but that's Earth. And the Terran hegemony was radiated outward with the expansion of humans with the advent of jump drives. And in the BattleTech universe, they're called KF drives, or Kearney Fuchida drive, named after the two scientists who theorized the ability to warp space travel dozens of light years nearly instantaneously. The jump technology that these scientists dreamed about finally came into fruition with the Deimos project in 2107. I believe that was shortly after their deaths. The first experimental jump-powered ship to travel from Earth's zenith to its nadir in a single jump, that happened in 2107. A year later, the first real jump from Terra to a different planet, Tau Ceti, as the first real interplanetary jump happened. And from there on out, human expansion was imminent and a driving factor into the expansion of humans into the universe. Rapid expansion of humans through jump ships, along with other factors, led to an interstellar states called the Terran Alliance. Like you see, think about all these jump ships kind of sprawling out, all these new worlds that are being populated over time. Um, in the known universe, the humans start expanding into the universe. So that rapid expansion of jump ships started this thing called the Terran Alliance. And after a military coup, transformed into this concept called the Terran hegemony. And the Terran hegemony over time drove rapid increases in technology and military might across the known star system. The hegemony's early expansionist policies over those years created these five great houses. So they kind of fractioned off into a little bit of these different great houses. And think of the great houses in the BattleTech lore, the inner sphere great houses as these nation states, all of the inner sphere. These five houses are House Davion, House Steiner, House Merrick, House Liao, and House Kurita. And there are other houses, but those are the five main houses that you hear a lot about. There's also a loosely confederated set of worlds joined together on the outer edges of the Great House's territory called the Periphery. We'll talk about that more later on, but think about they're kind of these loose nation states that are a little bit kind of more the frontier worlds, a little less I don't want to say civilized, but they're a little less. They're more of a loose coalition as opposed to governments or areas of their own right. Um, Eventually, the Terran hegemony and the major houses and the periphery joined together into a singular entity called the Star League. You'll hear a lot about the Star League in the Battletech lore. And for years and years, the Star League, for better or for worse, was the ruling body or the council over the entirety of the Star League worlds, which included the Terran hegemony, the Great Houses, and the periphery. Star League was ruled by a dynastic house of lords called the Camerons. It's basically a house lineage or a lineage of a family that was handed down from generation to generation. And this house or this family passed down the title of First Lord of Star League. So that is sort of a title that got passed down between the generations of this family house of the family Cameron, last name Cameron. Needless to say, and I'm sure you can see where this is going, but not everyone was in love with the Camerons' notion of what the Star League was and their ownership or their kind of their mandate to lead or rule the Star League. And indeed, eventually there was this one fella named Stefan Amaris, and this guy is really the root of all that caused the Star League to crumble. So there's a long story I could tell about the fall of Star League. Maybe someday I'll do a lore video about that. But there's videos out there already on that, and they're in great detail. You can go take a look at those. The Black Pants Legion and Tex Talks Battletech has a great series of the Amaris coup. But this Stefan Amaris guy led a coup on Terra that ended up bringing Star League to its knees and installing Stefan Amaris as the new commander of Star League and doing everything he could to destroy the name of Cameron and the old notion of what the Star League was. Now, suffice it to say, there were factions within the old Star League who were not fans of Stefan Amaris, and they vowed to reinstate Star League. And the main protagonist there was a fella named Alexander Kerensky, and he was the foremost general of the Star League military forces before and during the Amaris coup. He and his loyalist armies, still loyal to the concept of Star League, were out on the edges of the known galaxy when the coup went down. Now, he and his forces took time to fight back over years to come back to the center of the Star League, Terra, driving all the way back into Terra and reclaiming the council to restore order. And the campaign worked, and Amaris was eventually dethroned. And with all the Cameron dynasty having been executed by the insane Amaris, by Stefan Amaris and his cronies, there was no more inheritors from the Cameron line to claim the chair of First Lord to run on the now reinstated Star League. So unfortunately, this became a recurring theme in the Battletech universe, and that is you can't trust the great houses to get along and work together for the greater good. So once Stefan Amaris was out, Alexander Kerensky did not want to step into that leadership role of the First Lord of Star League. He asked the great houses to name a successor, and the great houses now come together and say during their the early reformation of the Star League, or at least the intended to, they could not agree on how Star League should have been run. They could not agree. Like they all wanted to sort of be in that position of the First Lord, and that posed a problem because no one could really agree on it. Now, the Star League was good in a lot of senses because the Star League sort of ensured it was out external to the five great houses. It was sort of a ruling body that kind of kept the other great houses in check in terms of power. It sort of made sure that no other great house had more power than the other, and no other great house could dethrone and rule the other one. So each great house, now having kind of sat in the background while the Amaris coup was going on, and also sort of sat in the background and didn't necessarily help Kerensky repatriatize or repatriate, that's the word I'm looking for, didn't really help reconquer the remove Amaris from power and restore what was the Grand Star League, before. They all kind of sat back and waited. And so now that Amaris is gone, and Kerensky basically says, "Hey, look, we need to put together the Star League, the Council of the High Lords, or the First Lord. How do we do this?" None of them could agree because they all wanted to grab that seat of power. So, long story short, um, during the reign of the Star League, the great houses only agreed to being in the Star League because it essentially kept everybody else in check. Now that that power was up for grabs, no one wanted to allow one of the other members of the houses to kind of take ownership of it. So, what do the great houses do when Big Brother no longer exists to keep their thirst for power in check? They all claim the right to the throne of the First Lord of Star League, and they could never agree, and the inner sphere devolved into endless war. So Kerensky, seeing this and seeing that none of the great houses could agree on the leadership of Star League, and being a man of military honor who did not want to rule but only to serve, he would not and could not take over the seat for the First Lord himself. So what's a fella to do? Well, he says, you know what? This is kind of broken. I can't fix it. I know there are people loyal to the notion of Star League. I'm going to gather all of those who were formerly loyal to Star League. They took their warship and all their jump capable ships and all their military and all the materiel, and they engaged in this thing that's in the universe called the Great Exodus. They left the inner sphere and said, "Peace out. We're done. We're gone forever." Or were they? This is where we start to, okay, this is the beginnings of what's going to eventually become the clans. So fast forward, Kerensky and his exodus of ships go to colonize worlds in the galactic north, far, far away from the inner sphere. Like jumps and jumps and jumps. They kind of zigzagged across unknown space so that they couldn't, no one could kind of track them as they left, and they just like, we're gonna go away. We're not gonna let you follow us, and we're determined not to fall prey to the infighting and all the mistakes that were made and shown in the inner sphere. Kerensky and his descendants decided to make a new world or a new civilization better than the world of the one that they left behind. And during the following centuries, once they landed where they found a new place to inhabit, during the following centuries, they started building their own civilization. And meanwhile, in the inner sphere, the great houses devolve into this constant warfare for the ownership of what remained of the Star League. And these wars were dubbed the Succession Wars. You hear a lot about the Succession Wars. So the fall of the Star League happened. The Succession Wars took in place. This is where mostly the great houses, but there was other things that are going, other conflicts and warfare going on. But mostly this is who's going to be the successor for the Star League of the major houses. And during this series of endless wars, um, technically future historians find four distinct succession wars between the fall of the Star League, roughly 2781 to roughly 3050. The great houses expend tremendous amounts of material and lives and technology trying to better the other houses and be the next ruler of the Star League. And so brutal and endless were these wars that the technologies actually that powered that face of the war, particularly like Battletech technologies and among others, but particularly, hey, this is about stomping robots, so let's talk about the Battletech technologies. Many of the ability to reproduce, many planets and each one of these houses' abilities to reproduce this technology or rebuild it or even understand it becomes compromised, and it becomes some technologies within Battletech technology become very almost irreplaceable, and some technologies were even lost. And so you see this devolving of the Star League mech kind of the pinnacle of Star League mech technology sort of become lesser and lesser, and they're replacing it with more inferior weapon systems. They're replacing it with inferior armor or inferior scanners or weapons that don't, maybe they even replace missiles with rockets. And like we're really kind of like we're losing the tech. And so all the way up until about 3050, a lot of the technology that was formerly grandiose and part of like the top of the line battle mechs that Kerensky would have known from the succession from previously before the succession wars was gone and replaced with inferior technology. So meanwhile, during Kerensky's and his inheritors' 250-year exile, their civilization that they founded made leaps and bounds in technological advances. And not only technology, but the way the military and even society itself was restructured to be different in every way possible to avoid the mistakes that drove the inner sphere into this rapid decline. So they changed the way they structured their forces, they changed the way they fought, the rules under which they engaged, the manner in which they prosecuted battle. And for the purposes of this episode of this conversation, the technology that drove their machines into war. That's really what I want to get at. What is the difference between inner sphere technology on inner sphere mechs and clan mechs at the time of the clan invasion? Kerensky's descendants formed their societies into these structures called clans. And of these 20 clans that were formed, these are the focus of the forces that reappear in the inner sphere in 3049 with the clan invasion. Now, the clan invasion, known to the clans as Operation Revival, is the story of the technologically advanced warrior culture that became the descendants of Kerensky, who came back to the inner sphere to reclaim those worlds in the name of bringing back the ideology of Star League. Each clan that was part of the overall clan society generally fell into one of two major types of ideology or philosophy of kind of the way they viewed the inner sphere. And those are the Warden clans and the Crusader clans. And the Warden clans were those clans that sort of adhered to the Warden philosophy of clan ideology, where the idea was, in essence, that Alexander and Kerensky and his philosophy was like, we're leaving Star League, we're never coming back, we're going to remain aloof from the corruption and the decadence of what kind of really brought the inner sphere to its knees. Like, we're leaving the inner sphere and we're never coming back. We don't want to intervene with the inner sphere. We don't want to save them. We just really don't want to have anything to do with them. We're going to go do our own thing. The Crusader clans are very much different. Those were the clans that supported the Crusader ideology in the clan political scheme. In this essence, that the Crusader clan's philosophy was that we're going to return to the Inner Sphere and we're going to come back and we're going to reestablish Star League and the ideals of Star League. We're going to bring back like the light. We're going to bring the light back to the Inner Sphere. We're going to be that light, and we're going to do that through force of arms if necessary. And so each clan had a little bit of different take. There were, like I said, there's Warden clans and there's Crusader clans. And the whole reason that the clan invasion happened is that the Crusader clans essentially got their way and said, hey, look, we're going in there and we're going to take the Inner Sphere back. And therefore, the clans kicked off Operation Revival, which was the repatriation of the Inner Sphere by the clans to bring it back into a full realization of what the Star League once was. The clans invaded from the northern fringes of the periphery and drove to the point inward towards Terra. The clan invasion would last 2.5 years and would end with the clan's defeat at the Battle of Tukid in May 3052. And they were defeated by the most unlikely opponent, that being Comstar. And more about that later. But it was interesting that Comstar was kind of this secretive organization, is really kind of known as a telecommunications company that kind of managed interstellar traffic or communications traffic, but that's another story. But they had quite a few tricks up their sleeve. But anyways, the Battle of Tukid, which was basically the the culmination of the burgeoning war between the Inner Sphere and the clans, was where the clans were defeated by Comstar in the name of the Inner Sphere. So that's the backstory. So if you're not excited for the mechs that you're going to be seeing as part of that Kickstarter, I don't know what will. The like this technologically advanced, you know, lost but returning civilization that wants to reconquer the decadent, inner sphere and kind of save them from all their failings. And then the inner sphere is like, hey, we had this inner squabble. It's like, oh, let's turn around. Hey, there's all these bad guys coming in. Who are these guys? Like there's stories of mechs that that the inner sphere had never seen before, and that they're starting to attack. And it's like they see these mechs, like I can't identify these mechs. Who are they? They're like wiping the floor with us left and right. And eventually we realize that they're the clans, and they're basically the descendants of currency come back to liberate the inner sphere. So that's a pretty cool storyline. I dig it. But if you're newer to BattleTech, you might not be really fully aware of that. And so just understand that the clan mechs that you're going to be getting through the Kickstarter are those descendants of currency come to liberate the inner sphere. Um, anyways, so really the next part of this video is what I want to talk about. Like, okay, that's great and all. I understand the context behind where these new clan mechs are coming from, but how, like on a more tactical or tactile level, how are those mechs going to look or feel or play differently than the mechs that you are familiar with from the inner sphere, from a game of armored combat? So let's take a look at some of the differences between a clan mech and an inner sphere mech. So first up, the upsides: technology, training, and genetic engineering. All benefits to the clans. So clan mechs are mechs, just like any inner sphere mech. They're giant stompy death robots piloted by a mech warrior. Same concept, nothing conceptually different. The key difference between an inner sphere mech and a clan mech is 250 years of technological advancement, as well as technological degradation of the inner sphere mechs. Remember, from the Star League era, mechs before the fall of Star League are generally technologically superior to the ones that are in the inner sphere right before the clan invasion. So this technological gap is a pretty big thing, and that's what we're going to focus on here. What are the gaps and the capabilities? So the first differential from a technology perspective is the concept of omnimechs. Clan mechs are often referred to as omnimechs as they use omni technology. So what the heck is omnitech and what is the heck is omnimech technology? Well, an Omnimech just means that it's a battle mech that has interchangeable weapon systems via hardpoints that can be swapped out based on mission need. So you think of an inner sphere mech, there's certainly variants of inner sphere mechs, but really, for the most part, a Warhammer mech is a Warhammer mech, and to take the PPCs off and put something else on, that's a fairly major refit. Um, so moving towards an Omnitech or Omni-mech sort of configuration of a battle mech, that was a pretty dramatic departure to previous military design. So think of it this way. Most inner sphere mechs are a mono build. Again, there's official variants, but once you've got that variant, that's what you've got. And if you, like I said, if you're going to swap out the weapons, that's a major refit at best, or sometimes it's a whole new variant. And those weapons aren't necessarily, the whole mech isn't designed to swap out weapons like that. You've got to do some significant work. The point is, if you want to take your 75-ton Marauder and swap out its weapons and its arm, you're talking about a major refit. For an Omni-mech, that's just an hour or two of work if you've got the right equipment. You basically take that weapons pod off. Let's talk about the Mad Cat, which is a great canonical um, inner or clan mech. You take one weapon pod off and you replace it with another, and boom, you've got a completely different configuration. You've done you've swapped out the weapon loadouts relatively quickly, and that ability to swap out those weapon designs is baked right into the overall mech design. For Omnimechs, there is usually a standard configuration, like a standard weapon pod loadout, but those hard points can be swapped out with others with relative ease. And so um, again, that 75-ton Timberwolf or Mad Cat can change those missile racks to PPCs or whatever in just a matter of hours. And blammo, now your mech is configured to take on a whole different theater of war and can be dedicated as a city fighter or a jungle fighter or a long range support. If you've got those weapon pods available and you've got the equipment to swap out those pods, you're good to go. So this gave the clans a tremendous advantage in battlefield flexibility. If you don't have the right mech for the right mission at hand, you simply swap out the Omni-mech pods, the weapon pods, and then bammo, you're good to go. Also, the clans retrofitted existing inner sphere designs in some cases into Omnitech Omnimech technology. So you will see some inner sphere designs later become Omnimechs with weapon loadout swap technology. So like if you see in the Kickstarter, you'll see like the Warhammer 2 or the Marauder 2 or the Hunchback 2. Those are basically inner sphere mechs kind of redesigned, refitted to be more in line with clan technology. So Omni Mech and Omni Mech weapons technology is one point in which the clan mechs differ. The next one is weapons, and this has something to do with increased weapons technology, but it also has a lot to do with they didn't lose the tech that they got from Star League. So clan technology often deployed upgraded versions of weapons on their platforms on their battle mechs, and a lot of that had to do with those weapon platform technology developed by the clans improve both the range and the damage of the weapons, including things like laser weapons and PPCs. Some systems are also weighed less, like they took less space on the mech, on the battle mech chassis and whatnot. So not only could the weapons reach farther and do more damage, the clan mech could carry more of them because each weapon didn't take as much weight. And that's not all. The clan mechs tended to have double heatsink technology. So this was tech that was prevalent in Star League. So some of these weapons with the extended ranges or extended or increased damage, that was Star League era tech. But also Star League era tech had this concept of double heat sinks. So these heat sinks could dissipate twice the amount of heat that the inner sphere mechs of the time could. So not only could their weapons reach farther, hit harder, way less so you could have more of them, but you could fire more of them consistently and contiguously so that you're putting more damage downrange than your inner sphere counterpart. So inner sphere mechs during the clan invasion typically could not outshoot a clan mech. And why is all this important? So all those weapons in a clan mech must generate a ton of heat and generate a ton of damage. But if you're able to dissipate that, you're looking at a 2 to 3 multiplier on the amount of DACA that you can put. So if you have one clan mech, can really realistically put out the same firepower or more of 2 to 3 inner sphere mechs. That's just crazy to think about. So it's like, you are getting outgunned. If you're not going 2 to 3 against one on the clan mechs, you can imagine inner sphere pilots kind of losing their marbles right there in the cockpit. It's like, oh my God, this one clan mech is like completely wiping out my lance, and you're not going to have good morale over that. So I think the weapons technology is a crazy thing to sort of think about. Another thing to think about with clan tech was armor. Now, clan mechs most often carried a superior armor plating to the inner sphere equivalent, kind of post-succession wars mechs. Um, this is called ferrofibrous armor, and it utilizes a weave of ferrosteel, ferrotitanium, and diamond weave fibers, which boosts the tensile strength of the armor plating. And ferrofibrous armor provided more protection per ton than standard armor that you would find on the inner sphere mechs of the same time frame, but it does tend to take up a little bit more space on the vehicle. The ferrofibrous armor also takes up less critical slots on your clan than the inner sphere mech, and ferrofibrous armor was first developed by the Terran hegemony and mass produced by 2571. So this is Star League level tech, which was lost to the inner sphere during the Succession Wars. Now, the Draconis Combine, one of those 5 great houses that I spoke about, was one of the first ones to recreate it in 3040, but it was not common amongst the inner sphere by the time of the clan invasion. So was it available to the inner sphere? Yes. Was it in mass production and available? Not really. Um, so pound for pound, clan mechs had the advantage generally in armor. They could get the same levels of protection for less weight. Now, while ferrofibrous armor was not a clan technology invention, again, it was kind of in the Star League era, the clans were able to retain that technology and they developed during the Star League era, and unlike the Inner Sphere, which largely lost this ability until the clan invasion. So the clans also retained the ability to produce endosteel, ferro-aluminum armor, and structural technologies in addition to that. So they developed memory metals, which were instrumental in the development of body armor for elementals as well, which is a topic for another chat. But suffice it to say, not only did they not lose the Star League era tech, but they developed new techs of their own, particularly for things like elemental armor. So that's kind of a big deal in terms of like they're able to put out more damage. They're also able to take more damage pound for pound or ton for ton than an inner sphere mech. I think also there's training and medical kind of advancements considerations as well. So in general, clan mech warrior training was rigorous and exhaustive. The clan focused heavily on martial pride and prowess and excellence, demanding the best of their warriors. In game terms, the way that translates is that clan pilots tend to be, on average, better than their intersphere counterpart pilots. I don't know if this is official, but intersphere regular mech pilots are gunnery 4 and piloting 5, whereas clan pilots are generally gunnery 3 and piloting 4. So in general, they've got a little bit of an edge in terms of skill for both shooting and piloting in fisticuffs and stuff like that. So you, of course, have to pay the battle value for that in game terms, but in general terms, there's kind of a lore perspective reason why it's very in line with the lore that your clan pilots, kind of pound for pound, are better pilots than your intersphere pilots because they're very extensively trained. Additionally, clan warriors were often bred to be larger, more muscular, and in some aspects even genetically modified to be so. So the way that this came about was the elemental warriors, essentially power armor suits or basically mini mechs, were piloted by some pretty impressive physical specimens who started off as genetic experiments to build better warriors. And also medical technology to repair injured warriors as well as replace damaged limbs or organs, became far advanced in clan society and technology, furthering their combat effectiveness. So, like, they trained these guys to be better. Like, if you lose that asset in war, like you've sunk a lot of sea bills or a lot of investment or time or whatever into making that warrior asset. They were able to keep those warrior aspects in combat longer, warrior assets in combat longer because they were able to keep them, healthier and combat ready. So, geez, man, this sounds like the clans were just like these perfect warriors. How could they have possibly, like, they've got better tech, they've got better warriors, they're better trained. How could they possibly have lost at the Battle of Tukid, you say? Well, that's a great conversation. We're not going to get into all the details on that, but there's some downsides to the clans as well. It's not all sunshine and roses and perfection on the clan side. So let's talk about some of the things that were Achilles' heels for them. So, a couple of things that stood in the way of clans' war fighting effectiveness against the Inner Sphere and Comstar. I'm not going to go into every detail here because I really kind of want to focus on the tech and how they play on the battlefield and as they play on the tabletop. But there was a couple of different concepts of how the clans fought and their war fighting mentality, which make them feel very different than the Inner Sphere. So when you're playing clan mechs, one of the things that is common in terms of like the way you might go about playing the clans. Now, I don't know that there are hard and fast rules on this, but I know a lot of people play this way because it is how the clans actually operated in theaters of battle. But they had this concept of kind of one-on-one combat, and it was very much you've got this concept of a trial of possession where you're trying to possess someone's warfighting material. But they would have like these duels or these one-on-one fights, and you actually a clan mech warrior would have to essentially pick a fight with opponent mech warrior, and they would have to finish that fight until it was over. Either they won or their opponent won, and they wouldn't break off that engagement until one of those criteria was met. And so that they were kind of rule bound or honor bound. They had this concept of Zelbringen where they would pick an enemy and they would fight that enemy and they would go after that enemy no matter the cost. And so you can kind of think of like, there's parallels to like the American Revolution where the redcoats, they would line up in formation and they would do their ready aim fire and they would follow a very strict European mentality of prosecuting war. Whereas the American colonials were like, well, forget that. I'm going to hide behind the tree and I'm going to plink you from as far away as I can. Like, and I'm going to duck and run and I'm going to zig and zag. And, I'm not going to subscribe to your rigid dogma of how you're going to prosecute war. I think of a very similar thing when I think of the Klan's way of fighting. It's like they the clan mentality was a one of where they ritualized combat and they did it in very much a one-on-one duel fashion, like a duel, dual, or sorry, duel, duel, like not two but like the one-on-one fight. they prosecuted war in a similar fashion. So that was one. There's lots of, we can go into a deeper conversation on that, but one of the things that just not necessarily the technology, but the way that they fought was very different than the way that the inner sphere was accustomed to fighting battles. So they had the advantage of the tech, but the way that they fought wasn't necessarily advantageous for them. Another thing that kind of helped bring the clan war machine sort of to its knees at the Battle of Tukid was really extended supply lines. Like they went a really long ways and they sent their best and their brightest of an entire generation to fight and kind of retake the inner sphere. Well, it turns out when you've got really extended supply lines and you haven't fortified your supplies over that distance, it turns out it's really hard to kind of keep fresh material at the front of the line. And so they really struggled on a war footing front as well to kind of keep their supply lines refreshed um, as they started losing mech warriors. So that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But really, my intent with this video, this vlog, was to sort of give you a flavor. If you're new to Battletech, or if you've got some Battletech experience with the Inner Sphere mechs, like what are you going to sort of expect to see when you start seeing these clan mechs drop? Now, I appreciate inputs. If you feel like maybe I didn't hit on some of these details, please comment below. I'd like to hear from some of you veteran players that have really kind of just skimmed the surface in terms of like the lore leading up to and the creation of the clans, the way that clan mechs differ from an inner sphere mech, and really how they fight differently. I've really just scratched the surface here. There is so much to explore and in depth in each one of these topics that we could have several sessions of conversation on each one of these topics alone. So, anyways, I wanted to give you newer players a flavor of kind of what you're getting into with the clans. I think it's a very exciting time frame to start thinking about different types of BattleTech scenarios and games that you could play on the tabletop with your mechs. So let me know what you think, veterans and new players alike. Was this useful? What questions do you have? What other things would you like to hear about, or what things would you like to contribute to this conversation as we have newer players entering the BattleTech fray with the clan invasion around 3049? Hey, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.